Kesakos is your usual suspect. Welcome back to yet another live broadcast on your favorite football updates channel. It's a pleasure to be back on this beautiful Thursday night / evening to join you once again to bring you the latest from the world of sport. And today we'll be speaking about Chelsea and their 74 charges that they could face from the FA due to financial breaches. Now, we're going to be discussing that and much more tonight to see what there is to expect. Anyways, I was just checking out on a promo email from on here that I have no interest in. Anyways, so quickly, apologies for on the morning broadcast. If you went to the channel trying to look for that morning broadcast, I did delete it. We had done a broadcast that lasted for about 17 minutes, but upon reviewing it, I realized, there were so many breaks because I kept receiving calls, and the phone on which I was receiving calls is the one that was providing internet. So the entire outlook of everything did just look right or fit. So I ended up putting that one down. But anyways, for those of you, I think, and then its viewership hadn't been that much, if we're being honest. So it's a bit of a sacrifice that I ended up making. Anyways, allow me to have our audios tested and make sure everything does check out on the channel before we proceed any further than that. So, but like I said, Chelsea will be formulating a huge chunk of our debate this evening. Looks like our audios are okay on that front. So, and we will get to understand what are the sources of these financial breaches, how did they come to light, what should be the expectation in regards to Chelsea, and are there going to be sanctions? Are there going to be enormous fines? The stock of potential points deduction? Would that be unfair in itself? What's really going to happen to Chelsea? That's what we do expect to come through. On tonight's debate, in as far as those Chelsea breaches are concerned. So, also quickly, hi LFC, good to have you back. 74 charges is mad. Yes, just the other day, when the Premier League reached a settlement with Manchester City, we were discussing and wondering what happened to the 115 charges. What's not happening on that side? Well, it looks like while we're still waiting for verdict to come through on that side of Manchester City and the Premier League in regards to those 115 charges, we have to now digest what has become of Chelsea, because Chelsea were found in breach of financial regulations or financial, reporting regulations. And if we are being honest, really, what happened? Okay, let's look at it this way, because from the genesis of it, because these are charges that come to light in about 2022, 2023 thereabouts. So Chelsea did self-report to the authorities, that's to UEFA, the Premier League, and the FA about a discovery of financial irregularities. In other words, transactions that had not been recorded or that may have been poorly recorded at the time. Now, this comes in 2022 because Bluco, or Tony Bolly and his partners under Bluco, who were trying to acquire Chelsea, were doing the due diligence, and part of their due diligence, they did discover some financial improprieties, which they discovered, reported to the authorities to investigate further. And according to multiple reports, Chelsea have been forthcoming with all throughout this investigation, right at the UEFA level, at Premier League level, at the FA. Now, the charges are sort of maybe to further clarify on what the FA have discovered during this period of investigation. Perhaps maybe what Chelsea themselves had self-reported is less than what the FA found. We do not know that to be the exact strength of the truth, but I mean, if it is 74 charges, you never know. It could be. It could be a possibility. Maybe not out of deliberate, desire to leave some details out, but yeah, these are details we are waiting to come to light, because not so much detail has been given in regards to what those 74 charges are, pertain. But earlier on, we did have a statement put out by, I think, the FA in regards to those charges, and what I'm trying to find that statement to read it for you guys, because it was a brief statement, yes, that came through from the FA about the 74 breaches. And the statement says, regulation and discipline update. The Football Association has today charged Chelsea FC with breaches of regulations J1 and C2 of the FA Football Agents Regulations, regulations A2 and A3 of the FA regulations on working with intermediaries, and the regulations A1 and B3 of the FA third-party investment in players regulations. In total, 74 charges have been brought against Chelsea. The conduct that is subject of the charges ranges from 2009 and 2022. Primarily relates to events which occurred between 2010, 2011 to 2015, 2016 playing seasons. Chelsea has until 19th of September 2025 to respond to those charges. Now, like I said, this all came to light during Blue Coat's process of doing due diligence before the acquisition of Chelsea. We know what happened. The whole source of this begins when Russia goes to war with Ukraine, and of course with the UK government sanctioning Russian officials and the Russian oligarchs. Romano Abramovich was part of that cohort as one believed to have close ties with the Kremlin in Russia, or with Vladimir Putin. That's the president of Russia. So in essence, he is forced to sell Chelsea, a process that took a bit of time, although it was time bound, and eventually managed to go through with Tony Bolly and his partners eventually acquiring Chelsea for about £4 billion. Now, while they were doing their due diligence, in the process of acquiring Chelsea, they discovered some financial improprieties, and this also relates to these largely relate to Chelsea paying agents huge sums of money that were not well recorded, or that were poorly recorded. For example, there is a citation of huge sums of money that were paid to agents or intermediaries in the deal of Chelsea signing Eden Hazard. And we know at the time, teams like Man United, teams I think like Man City, teams like Arsenal were all interested in signing Eden Hazard. In fact, Arsenal really came close. But again, when you are competing for a player with Romano Abramovich, you did expect that he would pull a trick, one or two, to sort of get himself the advantage. And for him, that trick often lay with his deep pockets when it came to agreeing to pay, players' representatives or agents to try and get an advantage, according to multiple sources or reports coming through. So now, once they discovered those financial improprieties, the new Chelsea owners, that's Tony Bolly and his partners under Blue Coat, went to the authorities and said, this is what we discovered during our process of doing due diligence. So they reported to the FA, they reported to the Premier League, they reported to UEFA, and have been, quite very, very cooperative during the process of investigations. In any case, reports also do suggest that Chelsea withheld £100 million as a fee to help them in future, either litigation or sanctions pertaining to those financial breaches. So take an example. In simple terms, for example, if let's say, okay, maybe this one Ugandans will be good to relate to. If you're buying a car from an individual, or let's say you're buying a car from me, and I sell you a car, let's say at 5 million shillings, or which is roughly 1,000 and maybe $1,200. No, sorry, maybe $1,300 thereabout, or 1,400 thereabout, you know. So if you're buying the car from me at that amount, you could withhold 1 million shillings or 500,000 to be paid until I process the transfer forms. So if I transfer the car officially into your names, into your registered names, then I get my, you know, last installment or balance on the sale. So basically, Chelsea, in trying to protect themselves, or the new owners of Chelsea, in trying to protect themselves, apparently they withheld a certain amount of the transaction for buying Chelsea to help them with these kinds of things in the future. And because they knew they had reported themselves, something was bound to happen. And that's why in July 2023, Chelsea reached a settlement with the UEFA to pay a fine of 10 million euros. You know, 10 million euros is approximately about 8.4 million pounds or 8.5 thereabout. You know, depending on the exchange rate that you may use. So they did reach that agreement with UEFA, and they were fined that, they paid that, and now, of course, the Premier League and the FA continued with their own investigations, separate from those of UEFA, and things like that. So in this case, that is now, we're into 2025, the tail end of it almost in September, and we are learning that the FA is bringing henceforward 74 charges against Chelsea. Now, these are charges that Chelsea saw coming. They expected them to come at some point. And I'm sure whether the FA zero down to fining them, they might be expecting those fines because, you know, when you self-report on doing a crime, there are certain expectations you have in regards to what the repercussions could be. And for Chelsea, that is no further from, you know, the truth. That's not any further from facing fines. And now some reports have gone on to suggest that there could be dock points. Now, if there are dock points, would it be fair? I've had arguments that it wouldn't be fair to the new owners because they've been cooperative, because they've self-reported. Well, remember, the punishment is not on the new owners. It is on the Chelsea, that is the entity, you know. Now, if let's say it's not like Chelsea became 3 years old just because they were acquired by Blueco, you know. Chelsea's history remained with them, you know, for all the years they've been. And it will never be written off record that Roman Abramovich was the owner of Chelsea for close on to what? To 2 decades, you know. So the punishment will be on the club, not the individuals. So let's not personalize this also. However, I also understand the school of thought of those making the suggestion that maybe in the FA, or if being dock points was one of the repercussions, could be a bit of double jeopardy. Why? One, we're talking about things that happened years ago, although not too many years ago, but also if somebody has self-reported that this is what I've discovered. Remember, they were not in position when these crimes were being committed. So they've reported upon discovery, you know. So you must afford them a bit of courtesy, a show of faith to appreciate that they reported themselves, you know, that they came to you when they discovered that something wasn't right, you know. So you must credit that. How do you credit that? By giving lesser punishments, and maybe not being dock points could be one of those in this particular case. So if you have 74 charges preferred against them, but they did self-report, they did open their doors to you to say, look, I've discovered this is not, this wasn't being done right. You're open to come and investigate. I have handed over all the historical financial records that I do have access to for you to dig through and, you know, make your further findings. I've been cooperative throughout the course of the investigation. Seriously or clearly, an expectation should be there that you should be lenient to encourage, you know, future such correspondences, because it may have started with Chelsea, but certainly it may not end with Chelsea. Now, for example, if let's say at the time of acquiring Manchester City, the Qataris had made similar discoveries and brought them forward, you ought to leave room that encourages future scenarios like that of Chelsea, that clubs can self-report, or new owners can self-report upon discovering that certain things were not being done right, which creates a bit of builds trust and faith within a system, if you want to build a working system. But also, because if you punish heavily, then if somebody discovers a future improprieties, they may choose to hide them further. They may choose to hide them further to avoid the kinds of penalties that you may have awarded to Chelsea. So while I may not be entirely in agreement that Chelsea not be docked points, I understand the school of thought of those that are making the argument that severe punishments could be a double-edged sword for the future of football, in terms of how football is run, but also, if you're a regulator, you ought to set precedent, So, for example, let's say this could be put in writing that if this had been independently discovered, then Chelsea would have been docked 10 points. And because they self-reported and they've been open to investigations, blah, 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 we are reducing it to 4 points, So that, in a way, one, you send a message, but also acknowledging. Or then you set a standard rule. You use this as a platform to set standard rules to say, if you do self-report on manners of such breaches, this is what the penalty will be. And if we discover without you self-reporting, then the punishment could be this severe, So in a way, you ought to use this as to set precedent, because it's a very, very significant, incident in football. Suddenly, we know that it wasn't too far back when Evangelos Marinakis acquired Nottingham Forest. Every other day we speak of clubs that are trying to be acquired or clubs that could be acquired, and we're talking recently in 2021 it was Newcastle being acquired by the Saudis, and Amanda Stevali was very crucial in that, along her husband Madad Wedosi. And then you go to Swansea, where Snoop Dogg is now a shareholder. You go to a team like Wrexham, where Ryan Gosling is an owner, and things like that. So we know that the thing of our clubs being acquired is become a routine thing. It's become a more routine thing as opposed to what it was many, many years gone by. So because you want to create that sort of corridor for maybe new club owners or people trying to acquire clubs to be straight with you, because remember, whatever happens with Chelsea does not end with Chelsea. It helps to improve the game going forward. It helps to improve systems. It helps to improve structures. And so you want to use that as a good platform to want to teach, to educate, to also learn, how do you go about these things? Because, for example, it could also boil down to how much was actually paid. So, for example, if the FA did not expect that agents can be paid £10 million to if-West deals, in terms of what they call investment in player regulations, among other, and then the FA football agents regulations and things like that, you could say if the breach is of this nature, of this magnitude, then this is the penalty, just like we put it. But I mean, it's not looking pretty for Chelsea. Not that they're going to face anything too severe. I think they will survive this, given that they self-reported. Given that they've self-reported, so that gives them a bit of leeway or something to be on the brighter side of things for. If you did commit a crime and you did self-report, that shows remorse. But remember, these are not the crimes of the current owners of Chelsea. So that's also significant in that nature, you know. Anyways, we will leave Chelsea's issues at that and then proceed among other matters. Meanwhile, it was confirmed that Thiago Alcantara has returned to Barcelona as an assistant coach to Hansi Flick. So that's there. Then Anthony Martial is on the verge of completing a move to Monterrey. Green light did arrive from AEK Athens to let Antonio Martial go to Monterrey. That's a club where Sergio Ramos plays, the former Real Madrid captain and centre back. You know, so that's significant news. And then, of course, like I keep saying, the weekend does get underway. Club football does return, and it's exciting, you know, to know. But before we get into the weekend shenanigans, Emerick Laporte to Athletic Bilbao has been finally wrapped up. You remember we did discuss that a little bit, how brilliant a move it was for Emerick Laporte to return to Athletic Bilbao. Remember, that's why he left to join Manchester City, and then he left Man City to join Al Nassr, but now he's left Al Nassr to reunite with Bilbao. Now, while the transfer had been made, FIFA had yet to sort of approve everything in terms of paperwork and everything that pertains, you know, official confirmation from FIFA. So it's been finally approved, and he will be an Athletic Bilbao player. This comes ahead of their weekend game. They do have a weekend fixture. I think who is it going to be against? Bilbao. I know they play on Saturday. They're in action on Saturday. Let me see. No, this is Sunday. This is Sunday. Okay. Yes, they'll be in action on Saturday against Deportivo Alves. And after that, they will entertain Arsenal at home. That's at San Mamés in the UEFA Champions League. So that will be happening also. So he is a very, very brilliant acquisition or addition to that Bilbao side. Like I said, the Premier League or action does get underway this weekend, and managers have already kick-started their, you know, pre-match press conferences and other things. But I wanted to pick a quote from, you know, Ange Postecoglou, where he said, "I want to win trophies. That's what I've done all my career, and that's what we will do here at Nottingham Forest." But speaking about the build-up to that Nottingham Forest game, like I did say the other day, it feels like it's coming a little too early in for Ange Postecoglou. But in football, there's always not much time. Every time you're a new manager and you're arriving at a club midway the season or halfway the season, or when the season has resumed or started, then you do not get the luxury of having a preseason kind of setup, you know. So that's what he misses. And like I said, we will count this as a full season. And meanwhile, our players like Gianluigi Donnarumma are having their first training sessions with Manchester City. We know about Pierre Hincap. He's also had his first training session with Arsenal. We know what's his name? Alexander Isak at Liverpool. He's had his official first training session with Liverpool. That was yesterday. So a lot of these players that joined respective clubs on deadline day or in the last you know, day or two of the transfer window are having their first training sessions. You know, for those that had joined the week earlier, they had gotten the chance to meet and greet with their new teammates. Players like Alexander Zinchenko at Nottingham Forest, players like Jakub Kiwior at FC Porto, things like that, you know. So they are going to have that chance to meet their new teammates, you know, and get training and hope that they can get their careers on going with their respective new clubs. So Alexander Isak, I mean, what an addition. Liverpool acquiring him on the deadline day of the transfer window from Newcastle in a British transfer record fee of £125 million plus £5 million in what is to be expected add-ons. That is yet to come. So those are some of the things that you know, you really feel positive about. Meanwhile, on that very note, allow me to say thank you to every single one of you that has gone to the channel under the video section and watched listened to interviews with Aldrin and Songa Senior. I know the first interview was predominantly appealed to the Ugandan audience because it speaks about the new Premier League format of the Uganda of the StarTimes Uganda Premier League, and then we talked about much about the Uganda Cranes in reference to Chan, in reference to the World Cup qualifiers and things like that. And then in the second interview where we got to speak on why he expects Liverpool to defend their Premier League title, why he thinks that Arsenal won't win major trophies, saying Arteta is the reason for that. We had a soundbite on Manchester United and Nottingham Forest, among other things. So for all of you that have managed to watch those two videos, I thank you so much. We do not take your love and support for granted. So speaking of Liverpool defending their crown, I mean, when you have the tools, the kind of tools that Arne Slot has, that's the expectation, especially bearing in mind that you won that Premier League title without some of these tools. Now, last season, arguably, he had one of the best squads, if not the very best squad in the Premier League, and it gets better this season round. Because when you close the gaps, or when you close the gaps and make improvements in certain areas within your squad. So, for example, Trent Alexander-Arnold leaving and bringing in Jeremy Frimpong, that's closing a gap. When you bring in Milos Kakes to help Andy Robertson, that's bridging a gap with the anticipation, given that Andy Robertson is 30 years of age, so you would want to be transitioning away from him. Then players like Giovanni Leone, the defender, that's sort of improving on squad depth in as far as that a defensive side is concerned. When you get an attacking midfielder like Florian Wirtz, that's a huge acquisition. That's not even an upgrade, because you did not have one of that kind. When you bring in a player like Hugo Ekitike to replace the fallen, Diego Jota, there's an improvement on that when it comes to goal threat. When you lose Luis Diaz and keep Cody Gakpo, but also create room for an upcoming Riongo Moho, I mean, that's a good thing, because you brought in resources into the club, selling him for about 75 million euros to Bayern Munich. That ought to be commended. Then you bring in Alexander Isak, who we know is a huge upgrade on Darwin Núñez. So when you look at most of the acquisitions, then bringing in arguably one of the best goalkeepers that there has been in the last couple of seasons in the Spanish La Liga, in Georgi Mamadashvili from Valencia, I mean, you ought to have to commend that, really. So Liverpool have that. They have the tools, they have the squad, and we're talking about a team that seldom loses. As we speak, they've already won 3 of their opening fixtures. Regardless of how they won them, they won, beating Arsenal, beating Bournemouth, and as well as beating Newcastle. Now, in Newcastle and Arsenal, those are top 5 teams, 2 top 5 teams that they faced already in the season, So a bit of a tough start, and yet they've gotten over the line in those games. Of course, now they do have themselves a date with Burnley over the weekend on Super Sunday, and there won't be any excuse whatsoever not to start Alexander Isak, although I won't be surprised if he's not started, because he did not have a preseason, really. He basically trained by himself because he refused to go on preseason tour with the rest of the Newcastle squad. So that, must affect him in one way or the other. So I feel that he may not be ready enough, or he may not be given the opportunity to feature for Liverpool or to start for Liverpool. Could he come off the bench? Most definitely. But so my anticipation is that he will come off the bench to try and ease him into this, given that he did not have the kind of preseason that you ordinarily would expect a player of his caliber to be having. If he had had a decent preseason, the way Benjamin Sesko had with RB Leipzig, I would understand moving him in straight away. But also, while I mean, it's hard to compare to the scenario of Victor Gyökeres, because while Victor Gyökeres had not had a good preseason, he at least got to feature in Arsenal's game against Bilbao. That's during the the Emirates Cup. He also got to feature in the Arsenal game against was it Sevilla? So then also in that game against Tottenham, which they lost in Singapore by goal to nil. So well, Alexander Isak didn't get a chance to have all that. So there's a bit of difference in that way. So nonetheless, my expectation is that he wants that. However, there should be no excuses for Anna Slot, which I believe could turn out to be his undoing. I mean, it's going to be a bit of pressure on him, not just a bit, actually, enormous pressure on his shoulders. While he's bought him the best amount of time in being the Liverpool manager by winning a Premier League trophy in his debut campaign, having the squad improved in the manner in which it was, Liverpool having to break their transfer record twice in the same window, really breaking that of the Premier League as well entirely, is one that comes with its expectations. Because if you manage to deliver the Premier League title with that, why not deliver it with this, which is even better? They crashed out of the UEFA Champions League at the round of 16 at the hands of the eventual champions in PSG, which by Liverpool standards was not good enough. But let's not forget that in the league format phase, they had finished on top or on the summit of that 36 team log. So that in itself was commendable. I think they lost 1 out of 8 games and they won the other 7. So really, I mean, so there's going to be an expectation that in the UEFA Champions League, you go further ahead. Anything shy of a semi-final will be an underachievement by Liverpool's standards, because we're talking about a team that has won this competition at least 6 times, the very recent being in 2019. And then, of course, when you went back to 2005, when they were winning it, 2005-6, when we were beating AC Milan, 2005, yes. Because 6 it was Barcelona beating Arsenal, and then in 2007 they were in the finals and things like that. So they need to go back to that era between 2005 and 2010 or 9 when they were reaching the semi-finals and finals. Again, they need to go back to the era of 2018. 2018 they were finalists, losing to Real Madrid. Same thing happened in 2022, losing to Real Madrid. At 2019, they win it in between there. So you can see that they only missed out on what? The 2020 final and 2021, really. So there's that bit of expectation that he should be doing better with this kind of squad that he's been able to assemble, given all those signings. But like I said, on Super Sunday, that's when Liverpool do come into action against Burnley at 4 p.m. East African time. That should be the expectation. Anyways, away from them, let's quickly run to Arsenal. Like I said, managers have been speaking. There's going to be a huge expectation. I think Ange Postecoglou knows one too well that starting your career with Nottingham Forest, with the first trip being away to the Emirates Stadium, doesn't come any harder of an ask for a new manager at a new team, because we won't argue that he is a new manager in the Premier League when he had already spent 2 years with Tottenham Hotspur before being shown the exit, after the end of last season, So the good thing or the advantage for him, and the key takeaway in all this is that he's already well accustomed to the Premier League. He knows what to expect. We're talking about an Arsenal team that is played at least 4 times in the last 2 years. That's home and away in the Premier League. So Nottingham Forest is a team that he got to play a similar number of times. While he was on the opposite side of the dugout, I'm sure he must have wanted this, So something like that. Anyways, so he's going to have, I think, the right expectations coming into this game. And for somebody that is a bit of a media favorite, I think even when he loses the game, the media will cut him some slack. They will acknowledge that he's only had 2, 3, 4, 2 or 3, 4, maybe 4 at best training sessions with those lads if they're training morning and evening after the international break before he commands his team out there. And that's why the other day I was saying my expectation is that he won't change much in regards to the team setup in terms of uh, in terms of what to expect. When you look at because you have two contrasting managers. If in Nuno Santo and Ange Postecoglou, you do not want to bring an overload of changes going into your first game. I think you want to change things game by game, depending on how you analyze and assess the team. So my expectation would be that the likes of Ola Aina are still, are within that team. Of course, the goalkeeper Matt Sells. Then you do expect players like Chris Wood, Morgan Gibbs White. You do expect players like Danny Ndoye and things, things like that. Do they have there some injuries to some injury concerns to deal with? Ola Aina is a doubt. Then Nicolas Dominguez, as well as Nicole Savona. This one is a new recruit. Now, Dominguez suffered an anterior cruciate ligament injury, but again, you're also playing an Arsenal side that has their own injury worries to be concerned about. So, for example, based on the footage that we've seen, William Saliba and Bukayo Saka were not part of training. Of course, Gabriel Jesus is not expected to be part of it, nor is Kai Havertz. And then Christian Nogat would not know what's happened, but at least Ben White was there. I want to find out whether there's a possibility of Nogat making the match day squad, because I did get the chance to watch the Arteta presser, in that. So, but we will wait and see. But yeah, there's an expectation that Ben White and Christian Nogat are back at it, Yes, actually, Christian Nogat is back in full training. So that also gives Arsenal a very, very huge boost going into that fixture against Nottingham Forest. And now you know that if Martin Zubimendi is feeling short of legs when it comes by the 75th minute, not that he's characteristic of that, then you have a Nogat to call upon. So that it's a kind of game where I expect more of a traditional Nottingham Forest, a Nuno Espirito Santo kind of Nottingham Forest, sit with a low block, try to catch Arsenal on the counter, try and exploit spaces left by their defenders trying to play that very, very high line, which they usually do. And we know Arsenal are going to be without William Saliba, so it's going to be Gabriel Magalhaes, Christian Mosquera, perhaps Ricardo Carafiori at the left back, and Urian Timber at right back. If there's any change in those roles, you do expect it maybe a Miles Lewis Kelly coming in at left back, and maybe a Ricardo Carafiori coming in at centre back, as opposed to Christian Mosquera starting, or Urian Timber. I do not think Ben White will be given a start in this one, because there's no need to rush him. He's just recovered from injury. So and things like that. So on the side of in that regard, that's how I view things. Anyways, so quickly, one of fixtures that is coming your way. I've read these ones before, but I never tire of reminding you guys so that you know what expectations to have. Maybe tomorrow I'll give my predictions going through the weekend. But the weekend is going to be really, really massive. Like I told you, Barcelona have themselves a date with Valencia in the Spanish La Liga, while in the Italian Serie A, Juventus have a date with Inter Milan. So we're talking about last season is, runners up, and the UEFA Champions League losing finals in Inter Milan. So it's a huge, huge game. Bayern Munich and Hamburger, traditionally it should be a big game, but we know Hamburger is really struggles in recent years with relegation and promotions, things like that. So, but in the Premier League on Saturday, Arsenal, like I said, will open the weekend with Nottingham Forest. Bournemouth will be at home against Brighton. Brighton, they're not the most decent of Brighton sides. Maybe Roberto Di Zerbi had spoiled us at some point. And we're talking about a Bournemouth side who went into the international break really strong, having beaten up against Tottenham Hotspur by 1-0, in their last outing. And remember they were away from home and they dominated almost every affair or aspect of the game that was important, including shots on goal and things like that. Then Crystal Palace will be at home against Sunderland, while Everton will welcome, Aston Villa at the Hill Dixon Stadium. Fulham will be up against Leeds, while Newcastle will take on Wolverhampton Wanderers. All those games coming at 5 p.m. East African time. Then we will have a derby between a London derby between West Ham and Tottenham Hotspurs, as well as a West London sort of derby between Brentford and Chelsea later on at 10 p.m. East African time. That's on Saturday. While on Super Sunday, like I told you, Manchester United in the Manchester derby will come up against Manchester City at 6:30 p.m. while Liverpool do open the Sunday with that game against Burnley. So have all those expectations to steer you into the week going into it. Anything we've not discussed, we will catch up tomorrow. We will pick up on it tomorrow. I don't know if I'll be able to do a morning broadcast tomorrow because I have a couple of engagements to get to in the early hours of the morning. So if it's to happen, it may come a little later than 9 a.m. That's the bit of expectation that I do have. Anyways, allow me wish you a blessed night, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye-bye. Thank you so much, LFC, for being part of this broadcast. Those of you that get to watch us later after this broadcast have ended, we do not take your love and support for granted. Bye-bye. See you.